Are you tired of shooting the same damn boring rifles all the time? Whether it's your AK or especially UAR guys, clone builds, ultra efficient, zero recoil, Gucci'd out beyond belief builds? It's too good, it's too efficient, and honestly, it's kind of boring. Well, let me introduce you to a rifle category that turns all that training you've done after all these years upside down. The Bullpup. Featuring controls that only make sense to an Australian and a barrel to overall length that'll make your 10-3 blush. But the main question is, are the downsides worth the trade-off? Hey YouTube, Kurt here with Oaken Ammo again. You guys clearly know the topic for today's video based off the title, but I just want to preface this by saying that while I do have a Celtic RDB, there are a variety of firearms out there beyond this and the AUG that I also shot for this video. So if one of these two rifles doesn't fit your preference, make sure to take an eye out there. I know the Tavor is a fantastic option and is loved by many. And just like that PDW concept type video did in the past, I do plan on doing reviews for both of these firearms separately in the future as well. So if you'd want to see those, feel free to hit that subscribe button. Let me know which one you would like to see first, and let's get into it. So before we get into it, what exactly is a bullpup? Well, thankfully it's fairly simple. Technically speaking, it's a rifle that has the breech behind the pistol grip. But in easier to understand terms, it's normally a firearm that has the pistol grip in front of the magazine. This feature allows for a shorter overall length while still being able to retain that 16-inch barrel length that we need here, or longer or shorter depending on your needs. Many believe these rifles to be generally lighter and more maneuverable than their traditional rifle counterparts, but honestly I don't necessarily agree with that. Many of these rifles tend to be roughly the same weight or sometimes even heavier than your traditional AR or AK, but since the weight is focused more rearward with the bolt and a good bit of the barrel being farther back, it tends to just feel lighter, allowing you to easily one-hand this guy without too much strain, whereas on an AR, this would be very physically demanding since you do have that longer length. As well as that, coming from an American perspective of using ARs all the time, the DI system that it uses tends to be extremely light, where many of these rifles here are either short stroke or long stroke or some cocaine-induced combination of the two, like this actually is. But we're going to leave more on this guy for, like I said before, a dedicated video. The Bullpup design was originally thought of by the British with the Thornycroft system, I believe it was called. Compared to its traditional Lee Enfield counterpart, it was 7.5 inches shorter and 10% lighter. But as you can probably see by how that bolt is positioned, this rifle seems like the most unergonomic thing possible. There are rifles that are bolt-action bullpups, as you can see with the Desert Tech over here, but the main difference is that that bolt is still a lot farther forward than the Thornycroft. I don't know how soldiers were expected to use the bolt when it was that far rearward on that. You can see on the Desert Tech here, it is much farther forward, allowing you to actually be able to get on it and stay on the rifle. On top of those poor ergonomics, the rifle was also lambasted for having very, very aggressive recoil, much more so than its traditional counterpart. Fast forward to 1977, Star Wars just came out. It's the new cool hotness, and obviously that made everybody want to have space guns to replace their old, dirty, wood, traditional, non-space guns. The Austrians, being the cool hipster Europeans, decided they wanted to be first to do this, and in 1977 were the first to make a bullpup, the AUG, obviously, their mainline infantry rifle, replacing the arguably much cooler looking FAL in my book. The French, not wanting to be outgayed by the Austrians, shortly after also put in the FAMAS. I believe that was 1978 if I'm not mistaken, so outgayed just for a short amount of time. The British, not wanting to be outdone by any of the other European countries, but still extremely slow, probably because they're fake and not real, came in with the SA-80 in 1985, almost a full decade after the Austrians and the French, while in that time still making the worst of all three of the main bullpups for them. In the following decades, many countries attempted to incorporate bullpups as their service rifles. The Israelis famously have the Tavor, the Chinese have the peculiar Type 95 QBZ, and many countries developed their own unique little different systems and different variants. But you might notice that I said they attempted to make it work. That is because most of these countries that have adopted the system have since dropped it, as well as countries that they sold the system to have also dropped it. Going back to more traditional AR type systems, with many of these countries picking up short stroke systems like the HK416. So after 40 to 50 years of continuous usage by these countries, why are they ditching these rifles when by many of their own tests, including the Australian, they found them to be better and more reliable than ARs? Well, obviously there's a few downsides to them. The first and most known about is going to be their awful triggers. King of these bad triggers is the AUG, as everybody knows, and having personally shot it, I can't disagree more. The neutered progressive trigger that is put in them is quite possibly the worst trigger I've ever used. It is heavy and mushy, and honestly, for the first few times I go shoot it, and every time thereafter for the first time, I always think the safety is on. I have to double check it just to be safe because it is just awful. But in all reality, I do think that is an issue that can be worked around. There are many bullpups that have decent triggers. The Tavor comes out of the box with a fairly decent trigger, and on top of that, Geisley does make an upgrade kit for it, or a trigger pack for it. Same for the AUG. You can get replacement trigger springs that make it still terrible, but just not as bad. And specifically, of all people, Keltec managed to make a remarkable trigger for this. It has a little bit of take up, but a very clear defined wall. Not too much weight. The only thing is that its reset is a little lacking in the noise department. But all things considered, this is a extremely good trigger. I'd honestly say it's leagues better than something like the AUG, even with its upgrade kit in. Building on top of the issue of generally bad triggers, the lack of customization is apparent in most of these rifles. You can see here on this that I'm rocking an LPVO and my little purse clone that I potted myself, which is really fun. It fits on here, but barely. The LPVO is essentially as far back as it can go to still be usable for me. If I wanted to put something on here like a clip-on thermal or a clip-on night vision, it just wouldn't fit. Whereas even on a shorter 10.3 AR, there is still going to be plenty of space for whatever I want to throw on here. Even putting something on like a light here gets kind of tricky since I have the charging handle on the left side up here in the front. While I don't think that this system is the worst, something like the Springfield Hellion does introduce even more complexity since it has that carry handle on there. On that, if you want to have this exact same setup, that purse is going to be very hard to reach with a thumb, since you got to go an extra like inch or two above, making it very difficult for somebody with shorter fingers. But even if you want to run a tape switch, since it has that carry handle and the charging handle is inside of that carry handle, it's going to be very likely that your tape switch is going to either get caught while you're trying to charge the gun, or if you're just moving through any sorts of bushes or bramble, that tape switch is going to get caught in any of those and just yank itself out, or get you caught and get you stuck in some bushes. Now, like I said, that same exact issue pertains to the trigger packs and the triggers in general. And I can't really say for certain if it's something where there's just not that many users demanding better triggers for these, but with the AUG being as popular as it is, I can't imagine that there aren't people demanding better triggers for it. So to me, it's unknown if that's an issue with the base design or if just Steyr or there's no third-party support because they don't think there's enough money in it. The next major issue that gets brought upon with these rifles is the gas issue. As you can probably tell, most of these firearms, this excluded honestly, have the ejection port right next to your face when you have a shoulder. And with many countries and just civilians adopting suppressors as time goes on, the traditional suppressors, such as this OCL polonium, tend to just drive a lot of that gas back into your face, especially if you are a country adopting one of these rifles shooting in full auto scenarios. But weapons like the Tavor, especially since it is just a funny looking AK, have a tendency to just fill your face with carbon every time you shoot it. Obviously, this is not a bullpup related issue only. ARs are notorious for getting carbon in your face every time you shoot them suppressed. But with an AR, like I mentioned before, there's a lot of customization that lets you try to work around the issue as best as you can. Whether it be a bootleg BCG that helps drive more of that gas out the ejection port, specialty made charging handles that try to help just keep that gas in there as best as possible, and or just redirect it in a different way so it doesn't go out to your face. But the reason that I say that this issue isn't as much of an issue anymore is with the advent of flow-through suppressors, even on normal ARs and on these, the issue gets kind of mitigated since the gas to the face issue isn't that big of a deal. I don't know how many of you guys have used some of the flow-throughs. I've used the Dead Air Lazarus, and I must say, I truly was impressed with how little gas you get while still retaining most of the sound mitigation and flash suppression compared to the polonium here. But with even all those downsides, I truly think these are fantastic rifles, just the concept in general. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get my hands on as many as I'd like, since they generally are speaking fairly expensive, this being the cheapest, which is why I have it. But I will admit that being able to have the same exact barrel length, as actually even longer, because this is 18, and a 10.3 AR package is extremely nice, since I, hypothetically could reach out to those further distances. if I ever manage to get the range to be a little bit longer. Top of that also, the weight balance on this is fantastic. I've had a few smaller stature people shoot this compared to just a equivalent AR, and a lot of the times they're big fans of it since the weight is more to the rear. They don't feel it as much, whereas for me it's not as big of a deal, but I like being able to have guns that all my friends can shoot without any question. That's basically where the benefits end though. The smaller overall length for this is the driving factor. So basically you're trading customization for size, and that's the question that has to come up to each individual user. For me, I have both, and I'm sure like many of you guys, y'all have tons of ARs. So I think it's fun to give something else a try from time to time and just break away from the habits that you know. A non-issue in my mind, at least, that I see brought up with these is that the manual of arms is obviously very different from your standard AR. But the reason I say that it's a non-issue is because every gun, or most guns at least, have manual of arms that are different than an AR. Specifically with these guys, the reload is a bit different. Having to reach into your armpit to pull out that magazine doesn't come natural to most Americans. Whereas for most Europeans, or if you served like in the Australian or Austrian army, this feels normal and the AR feels funny. So realistically, it just comes down to training. When we first got out for the shoot this day, I did a couple 1R1s, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them, because I haven't shot this in quite some time. And by like the third or fourth one, I was feeling great, and I was back to knowing exactly how to run this without any issue. And that same training carried over basically almost equally to the AUG. That's obviously got a little bit different button configuration, but that's more like going from an AK to an AR than from this to an AR, if that makes any sort of sense. That being said, I do still think that the AR is basically unbeatable in terms of ergonomics, especially with some of the more modern ones that are fully ambidextrous on the controls. This, while also being fully ambidextrous, it's just not as natural, but that might also just be the American bias in me, since I've shot an AR for forever at this point. That's all I had for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope that some of you guys see the value in what I'm saying and might consider trying out a Bullpup as your next range rental or whatever it might be. I hope you guys will consider joining me again next time. We should be back to LARPing in some form. We'll see exactly. I don't really know what I have planned. But like I said before, make sure to hit that like, comment, and subscribe button. Comment on the sticker. I'm sure everybody likes that to some degree. Have a good one, folks.